Before we begin this tale from the dusty trails of the Old West, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more stories that'll transport you back to the frontier days. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us bring you more adventures from the wild frontier. The sun blazed mercilessly over the ramshackle trading post of Willow Creek, a forgotten outpost where the desert wind carried secrets and the promise of gold. Dust devils danced across the barren landscape, kicking up clouds of grit that settled on everything like a fine coating of forgotten dreams. Samuel Hartwell adjusted his wide-brimmed hat against the glare, his weathered boots crunching on the sun-baked earth. The explorer had seen many frontier towns, but Willow Creek felt different somehow. There was tension in the air, thick as molasses and twice as dark. The trading post stood like a weathered sentinel against the endless blue sky, its wooden walls bleached grey by years of relentless sun. A hand-painted sign swayed in the hot breeze, creaking on rusty chains. The words, "Mackenzie's Trading Post," were barely visible. Samuel pushed through the batwing doors, spurs jingling with each step. The interior was dim and cool, a welcome relief from the scorching heat outside. Shelves lined the walls, packed with supplies, tools, and trinkets from across the territory. The air smelled of leather and tobacco. Behind the counter stood a burly man with graying whiskers and calculating eyes. This was Big Jim Mackenzie, the post's owner and unofficial mayor of Willow Creek. He looked up from his ledger, sizing up the newcomer with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen every type of drifter. "You look like a man with coin in his pocket," Big Jim said, his voice gravelly from years of frontier living. "What brings you to my humble establishment, stranger?" His smile didn't reach his eyes, and his hand rested casually near a shotgun beneath the counter. Samuel approached the counter, his leather satchel heavy with gold dust and silver coins. "Name's Samuel Hartwell. I'm an explorer, heading west to map the territories beyond the Colorado River. I need supplies for a month-long journey through rough country." Big Jim's eyes lit up at the mention of gold. "Well now, Mr. Hartwell, you've come to the right place. I've got everything a man needs to survive the wilderness. Food, water, ammunition, tools. But I might have something else that could interest a lonely traveler like yourself." The trader's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Got a woman in the back room. Strange circumstances brought her here, but she's looking for passage out of town. Might be willing to make a deal with the right gentleman." His grin revealed yellowed teeth. Samuel's jaw tightened. The practice of trading in human lives was unfortunately common in the lawless frontier, but it never sat well with him. "What kind of circumstances?" he asked, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt revolver at his hip. "Found her wandering the desert 3 days ago, half dead from thirst. She was wearing a wedding dress, all torn and dirty. But here's the peculiar part. She had this black mask covering her face. Wouldn't remove it for nothing. Won't say where she came from or where she's going." Big Jim leaned across the counter, his breath reeking of whiskey. "She's been working in the saloon to pay for her keep, but she's different from the other girls. Educated, refined, speaks like she's from back east. I figure she's worth more than the usual arrangements." Samuel felt a mixture of disgust and curiosity. "Where is she now?" The wooden floor creaked under his boots as he shifted his weight, considering his options. Outside, a hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing across the empty landscape. "In the back room, getting ready for the evening crowd. But for the right price, she could be riding out of here with you instead. Think about it. A woman's company on a long journey through dangerous territory. She could cook, mend clothes, provide companionship." The explorer's mind raced. He'd planned to make this journey alone, but the frontier was full of dangers. Having another person along might actually be beneficial, especially if she was educated and resourceful. But more than that, something about her story troubled him. "I'd like to speak with her first," Samuel said firmly. "If she's willing to travel with me of her own free will, I'll consider making arrangements." but I won't be part of any transaction that involves force or coercion." His blue eyes hardened with determination. Big Jim shrugged. "Fair enough. She's got spirit. I'll give her that. Might take some convincing." He led Samuel through a narrow hallway lined with dusty bottles and moth-eaten curtains. The floorboards groaned under their weight, and somewhere in the distance a piano played a melancholy tune. The back room was small and dimly lit, with a single window that looked out onto the desert. Sitting on a rickety wooden chair was a woman in a faded blue dress, her face indeed covered by a black silk mask that concealed everything except her eyes. Those eyes struck Samuel immediately. They were the color of storm clouds, grey and turbulent, holding depths of intelligence and something else, fear perhaps, or determination. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and despite the rough circumstances, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. "Ma'am," Samuel said, removing his hat respectfully, "I'm Samuel Hartwell. I understand you're looking for passage out of town." He studied her carefully, noting the way she held herself, the calluses on her hands, the slight tremor in her voice when she spoke. "That depends on the destination and the terms," she replied, her voice cultured and clear. There was an accent there, something from the eastern states, confirming Big Jim's assessment. "I assume you're not interested in the usual arrangements that frontier men seek." Samuel felt heat rise in his cheeks. "No, ma'am. I'm an explorer, heading west to map uncharted territories. The journey will be dangerous, and I could use someone with intelligence and resourcefulness. If you're willing to travel as an equal partner, I'll provide protection and safe passage." The woman studied him for a long moment, those grey eyes seeming to look right through him. "You're different from the other men who've come through here," she said finally. "Why would you help a stranger, especially one who refuses to show her face?" "Everyone has their reasons for privacy," Samuel replied. "I'm not one to judge. The frontier is full of people running from something or toward something. What matters is whether you're willing to pull your weight and watch my back when trouble comes." A ghost of a smile played at the corners of her visible features. "I can cook, tend wounds, shoot straight, and I know 4 languages. I've read every book on geography and survival I could get my hands on. Will that suffice?" The confidence in her voice was unmistakable. "More than suffice," Samuel said. "What do I call you?" He waited patiently, understanding that trust would have to be earned gradually. The afternoon sun streamed through the dusty window, casting long shadows across the room. "Call me Elena," she said after a pause. "And Mr. Hartwell, thank you. You have no idea what this means to me." There was genuine gratitude in her voice, mixed with something that might have been relief. Big Jim cleared his throat from the doorway. "Well, if you two are done with the pleasantries, we should discuss payment. The woman owes me for 3 days' room and board, plus there's the matter of her services in the saloon." Eleanor's face flushed with anger. "I serve drinks and clean tables, nothing more. You know that perfectly well, Jim Mackenzie." Her voice carried an edge of steel that suggested she wasn't someone to be trifled with. Samuel stepped forward, his hand moving to his money pouch. "How much?" His tone was clipped, businesslike. He wanted to get Elena away from this place as quickly as possible. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, dangerous. $50 should cover it," Big Jim said, grinning. "That's fair for the accommodations and the inconvenience." Samuel noticed how the man's eyes kept darting to Elena, as if he were reluctant to let her go. Without hesitation, Samuel counted out the gold coins, each one glinting in the lamplight. "There's your payment. We'll be leaving within the hour." He turned to Eleanor. "Do you have any belongings to collect?" "Just a small bundle," she replied, standing gracefully. "I travel light by necessity." Samuel noticed she moved with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to physical activity, not the careful steps of a pampered lady. As they prepared to leave, Samuel purchased the necessary supplies for their journey: food, water, ammunition, blankets, and a sturdy horse for Elena. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Elena emerged from the back room carrying a small canvas bag. She changed into practical traveling clothes, men's trousers, a cotton shirt, and sturdy boots. The black mask remained firmly in place, but Samuel noticed she'd added a wide-brimmed hat to help shield her face. "Ready?" Samuel asked, securing the last of their supplies to the pack horses. His own mount, a sturdy bay named Thunder, nickered softly in the cooling air. The horse had been his companion through countless adventures, and Samuel trusted the animal's instincts. Elena nodded, easily swinging up onto her horse with practiced ease. "I'm ready." There was determination in her voice, but also something else, anticipation perhaps, or fear. Samuel couldn't tell which. As they rode out of Willow Creek, the setting sun cast long shadows across the desert landscape. The trading post grew smaller behind them, and Samuel felt a sense of relief. Something about that place had felt wrong, oppressive. Elena seemed to feel it too, sitting straighter in her saddle as they put distance between themselves and the town. The desert evening was surprisingly cool, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled mournfully. "Thank you," Elena said quietly as they rode. "You didn't have to help me, but you did. I won't forget that kindness." Her voice carried across the still air, sincere and grateful. "We all need help sometimes," Samuel replied. "The frontier's no place for anyone to face alone." He glanced at her profile in the fading light, noting the way she scanned the horizon constantly, as if watching for pursuit. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the horses' hooves making soft sounds on the packed earth. Samuel found himself curious about his new companion, but he respected her privacy. If she wanted to share her story, she would do so in her own time. As full darkness settled over the desert, they made camp beside a small stream. The water bubbled softly over smooth stones, and the sound was peaceful after the oppressive atmosphere of Willow Creek. Samuel built a small fire while Elena tended to the horses. "You handle horses well," Samuel observed, watching her work. "Not many Eastern ladies know their way around livestock." He settled beside the fire, grateful for its warmth as the desert temperature dropped. Elena paused in her work, then continued brushing down her mount. "I grew up on a ranch in Colorado before circumstances changed." There was pain in her voice, quickly hidden. "My father believed women should be capable of taking care of themselves." "Oh, sounds like a wise man," Samuel said, pouring coffee from a battered pot. The aroma filled the air, mixing with the scent of wood smoke and sage. "What brought you to the desert wearing a wedding dress?" Elena accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Even with the mask, Samuel could see the tension in her shoulders. "That's complicated," she said finally. "Let's just say I had to leave quickly, and I didn't have time to change clothes." Samuel nodded, understanding that the subject was closed for now. He'd learned to read people during his years of exploration, and Elena was clearly carrying some heavy burden. But she was also strong, resourceful, and determined, qualities that would serve them well in the challenges ahead. The fire crackled softly, sending sparks up into the star-filled sky. In the distance, an owl hooted, and the desert settled into its nighttime rhythm. Samuel found himself oddly comforted by Elena's presence, despite the mystery surrounding her. "We should reach the Colorado River in about 10 days, he said, studying a worn map by firelight. "From there, we'll be entering truly uncharted territory. The maps I have are incomplete, based on old Spanish surveys and Indian accounts." Eleanor leaned forward, studying the map with obvious interest. "You're planning to follow the river north?" Her finger traced the route, and Samuel noticed her hands were steady, despite everything she'd been through. "Part of the way. There are rumors of a hidden valley beyond the Red Rocks, a place the local tribes consider sacred. If it exists, it could be the key to understanding the geography of the entire region." His eyes lit up with the passion that drove all his explorations. That sounds dangerous, Eleanor said, but there was excitement in her voice rather than fear. The tribes don't take kindly to strangers entering their sacred places. She seemed to know more about the region than she was letting on. It is dangerous, Samuel agreed, but the potential discoveries, it could change everything we know about this territory. He rolled up the map carefully, protecting it from the night air. Are you having second thoughts? Elena was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. No, she said finally. I'd rather face unknown dangers than what I left behind. The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Samuel felt a surge of protectiveness. Whatever you're running from, you don't have to face it alone, he said gently. We're partners now, and partners watch out for each other. The words came out more earnestly than he'd intended, but he meant every one. Elena looked at him across the fire, and even with the mask, he could see the gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Samuel. That means more than you know. Her voice was soft, vulnerable in a way that made his heart ache. They settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, the flames providing both warmth and light. Samuel lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the desert night and thinking about the mysterious woman who had joined his journey. Elena's breathing eventually became deep and regular, but Samuel noticed she slept tensely, as if ready to wake at the slightest sound. Whatever she was running from, it had left her perpetually on guard. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with a crisp coolness that would soon give way to blazing heat. Samuel woke to find Elena already up, tending the fire and preparing breakfast. She moved efficiently, economically, like someone accustomed to taking care of herself. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, handing him a cup of coffee. "I found some wild berries by the stream. They're not much, but they add flavor to the hardtack." Her mood seemed lighter than it had been the previous evening. Samuel accepted the coffee gratefully. "You're full of surprises," he said, tasting the improved breakfast. "Most people would have complained about the rough conditions by now." He watched her face, noting the way she kept glancing toward the horizon. "I'm not most people," Eleanor replied with a hint of humor in her voice. "Besides, this beats the accommodations at Big Jim's establishment." She shuddered slightly at the memory. As they prepared to break camp, Samuel noticed Elena's practiced efficiency. She loaded her gear quickly and secured it properly, checked her horse's condition, and helped him organize the supplies. Clearly, she wasn't just educated, she was experienced. "Where did you learn to travel like this?" he asked as they mounted up. "Most Eastern ladies would be helpless in the wilderness." He was genuinely curious about her background, though he tried to keep his questions respectful. "My father was a surveyor before he became a rancher," Elena explained, adjusting her hat against the morning sun. "He taught me that knowledge without practical application is useless, so I learned to ride, shoot, navigate, and survive." They set off across the desert, the morning air still cool enough to make travel comfortable. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by distant mesas and the occasional Joshua tree. It was beautiful in its starkness, but Samuel could see how it might overwhelm someone unfamiliar with the frontier. Elena, however, seemed completely at ease. She rode with confidence, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Samuel found himself impressed by her alertness and skill. Whatever her story, she was clearly no helpless damsel in distress. "Tell me about your explorations," she said as they rode. "What drives a man to map unknown territories?" There was genuine interest in her voice, and Samuel found himself opening up to her. "Curiosity mainly," he replied. "The world is full of wonders, and most people never get to see them. I want to document what's out there, share the knowledge with others, maybe inspire someone else to push beyond the boundaries." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "That's admirable. Most men I've known are driven by greed or power. You seem different." There was approval in her voice, and Samuel felt a warm glow of pride. As the day wore on, they fell into an easy rhythm. Elena proved to be excellent company, intelligent and observant. She pointed out things Samuel might have missed: animal tracks, weather signs, subtle changes in the landscape that indicated water or shelter ahead. "You're quite the naturalist," Samuel observed, as they paused to rest the horses near a small oasis. "Did your father teach you that too?" He was beginning to form a picture of her background, though many pieces were still missing. "Partly," Elena replied, loosening her horse's girth, "but I've always been interested in the natural world. Books can only teach you so much. You have to experience things firsthand to really understand them." She moved to the water's edge, checking its quality before allowing the horses to drink. Samuel found himself studying her profile as she worked. Even with the mask, he could see she was beautiful, but it was her competence and intelligence that truly impressed him. She was unlike any woman he'd ever met. "Why the mask?" he asked gently. "You must have a good reason, but it makes me curious." He kept his tone casual, not wanting to pressure her, but hoping she might trust him enough to share. Elena stiffened slightly, then relaxed. "It's complicated," she said finally. "Let's just say that there are people who would recognize me, and I prefer to avoid that complication." Her voice carried a note of finality that discouraged further questions. Samuel nodded, respecting her boundaries. "Fair enough. We all have our secrets." He settled beside the water, enjoying the cool shade of the palm trees. The oasis was a welcome respite from the harsh desert sun. As evening approached, they made camp in a sheltered spot among some red rocks. The formation provided protection from the wind and concealment from prying eyes. Samuel had learned to be cautious during his years of exploration. The frontier was full of dangers. Elena helped him gather firewood, moving quietly and efficiently. She had an uncanny ability to step without making noise, and Samuel found himself wondering where she'd learned such skills. Her education seemed to extend far beyond what most women received. "Tomorrow, we should reach the trading post at Devil's Canyon," Samuel said, consulting his map by firelight. "We can resupply there and get information about the route ahead." He marked their position carefully, maintaining the detailed records that were essential to his work. "I know Devil's Canyon," Elena said quietly. "It's not a pleasant place. The men there are rough, and they don't treat women with respect." There was something in her voice that suggested personal experience. Samuel looked up from his map, concerned. "We don't have to stop there if you're uncomfortable. We can go round, find another route." He was willing to change his plans if it meant protecting her from unpleasant encounters. Elena shook her head. "No, we need the supplies. I can handle myself, and besides, you'll be there to watch my back." She tried to sound confident, but Samuel caught the slight tremor in her voice. "You have my word on that," he said firmly. "No one will bother you while you're under my protection." The promise came out more fierce than he'd intended, surprising them both with its intensity. Elena looked at him across the fire, and for a moment the mask seemed to slip emotionally, if not physically. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's been a long time since anyone offered to protect me." "Do." The vulnerable note in her voice made Samuel's chest tighten. Whatever had happened to her, it had clearly been traumatic. He found himself wanting to know more, to understand what had driven her to flee into the desert, wearing a wedding dress. "Elena," he said carefully, "I know it's not my business, but were you married? Is that why you were wearing the dress?" He held his breath, hoping she wouldn't shut him out entirely. Elena was quiet for so long that Samuel thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I was supposed to be. The ceremony was interrupted." The pain in her voice was unmistakable. "I'm sorry," Samuel said gently. "That must have been difficult." He wanted to ask more questions, but he could see she was already struggling with what she'd shared. "It wasn't a marriage of choice," Elena continued, staring into the fire. "It was arranged by my family for business purposes. I was expected to be grateful for the opportunity." Her voice carried a bitter edge that spoke of deep hurt. Samuel felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "No one should be forced into marriage," he said firmly. "You had every right to refuse." The practice of arranged marriages was common enough, but that didn't make it right. Tell that to my father, Eleanor replied with a harsh laugh. He saw me as a commodity to be traded, not a person with feelings and desires. She wrapped her arms around her knees, making herself smaller. Samuel wanted to reach out and comfort her, but he sensed she needed space to process her emotions. You're free now, he said instead. Whatever happens, you don't have to go back to that life. Eleanor looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. Do you really believe that? That a woman can make her own choices, live her own life? There was longing in her voice, as if she desperately wanted to believe it was possible. I do, Samuel said without hesitation. The frontier may be dangerous, but it's also free. Out here, you can be whoever you want to be. He meant every word, and he hoped she could hear the sincerity in his voice. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. Samuel found himself thinking about Elena's story, piecing together the fragments she'd shared. A rancher's daughter, educated and skilled, forced into an unwanted marriage and brave enough to flee. The next morning, they broke camp early and continued their journey toward Devil's Canyon. The landscape became more rugged as they traveled, with deep arroyos and towering rock formations. Elena seemed increasingly tense as they approached the trading post. Are you sure about this? Samuel asked as they crested a hill and saw the ramshackle buildings of Devil's Canyon spread out below them. We could still find another route. Elena straightened in her saddle, her jaw set with determination. I'm sure. I won't let fear dictate my choices anymore. There was steel in her voice, and Samuel felt a surge of admiration for her courage. The trading post was even rougher than Willow Creek, with the kind of men who asked no questions and respected only strength. Samuel kept Elena close as they entered the main building, his hand resting casually on his gun. The proprietor, a scarred man named Dutch, looked Elena up and down with obvious interest. Well, what have we here? Don't get many masked ladies through Devil's Canyon. His grin was predatory and unpleasant. The lady is with me, Samuel said firmly, his voice carrying clear warning. We need supplies for a journey west. Food, water, ammunition. He placed gold coins on the counter, making it clear he was a paying customer. Dutch's eyes fixed on the gold, but he kept glancing at Elena. Awful hot for a mask, ain't it, lady? Why don't you take it off? Let us all get a look at what's underneath. Several other men in the store laughed crudely. Elena's posture stiffened, but she didn't respond. Samuel stepped forward slightly, his presence making his intentions clear. The lady prefers her privacy, he said quietly. I'm sure you can respect that. The tension in the room was palpable. Dutch clearly wanted to push the issue, but Samuel's reputation as a skilled gunfighter preceded him. After a moment, the proprietor shrugged and began gathering the requested supplies. Your choice, stranger, Dutch said, but secrets have a way of coming out in the desert. Sun has a way of burning away all pretense. His words carried an undertone of threat that made Elena shift uncomfortably. Samuel completed their business quickly and efficiently, eager to get Elena away from the unpleasant atmosphere. As they loaded their supplies, he noticed she was trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. It's okay, he said quietly. We're leaving now. He helped her mount her horse, his touch gentle and reassuring. They can't hurt you while I'm here. Elena nodded, but Samuel could see the encounter had shaken her. As they rode out of Devil's Canyon, he noticed she kept looking back over her shoulder, as if expecting pursuit. What Dutch said back there, Samuel said carefully, about secrets coming out in the desert. Is there something I should know? Something that might put us in danger? He didn't want to pry, but their safety might depend on understanding what they were up against. Elena rode in silence for several minutes before answering. My father, he's a powerful man. He has connections throughout the territory. If he's looking for me, he'll have men at every trading post, every town. Her voice was heavy with resignation. And you think he might be looking for you? Samuel asked, though he already knew the answer. That's why you're so careful, why you watch the horizon constantly. I know he's looking for me, Elena replied. I humiliated him in front of important people. He won't let that stand." She pulled her hat lower, as if trying to hide even more of herself. Samuel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. "Who is your father, Elena? What aren't you telling me?" He needed to understand the full scope of the danger they might be facing. Elena looked at him for a long moment, then made a decision. "My father is Colonel Marcus Worthington. He owns one of the largest ranches in Colorado, and he has friends in the territorial government. The man I was supposed to marry, he's the son of a railroad baron." Samuel whistled low. "That's some serious power you're up against." He understood now why she was so frightened, why she felt the need to hide her identity. "But that doesn't change anything. You still have the right to choose your own life." "Does it matter what I have a right to?" Elena asked bitterly. "My father sees me as property, a way to cement business relationships. He'll never stop looking for me, never accept that I won't be his obedient daughter." Samuel considered this information carefully. "Then we need to get you somewhere he can't reach you. The territories beyond the Colorado River are truly wild. No law, no government agents, no railroad barons. It was a dangerous plan, but it might be their only option." Elena's eyes widened with hope. "You'd really take me that far? Into unmapped territory?" There was wonder in her voice, as if she couldn't quite believe someone would go to such lengths for her. "Partners watch out for each other," Samuel said simply. "Besides, I could use someone with your skills in truly wild country. It's a fair trade." He tried to keep his tone practical, though his motivations were becoming more personal by the day. As they traveled deeper into the wilderness, Samuel found himself growing increasingly attached to his mysterious companion. Elena was intelligent, brave, and surprisingly funny when she relaxed enough to let her guard down. She was also beautiful, though the mask kept that beauty partially hidden. One evening, as they camped beside a small stream, Eleanor finally opened up about her past. "The marriage was arranged when I was 16, she said, staring into the fire. "I was told I should be grateful. The Pemberton family was wealthy and influential." "But you didn't love him," Samuel said gently. It wasn't a question. He could hear the pain in her voice. "I didn't even know him," Elena replied. "We met 3 times before the wedding day. He was cold, calculating. He saw me as a business acquisition, not a person." She wrapped her arms around herself, as if warding off unpleasant memories. Samuel felt anger building in his chest. "What happened on the wedding day?" "You said it was interrupted." He kept his voice calm, not wanting to push her too hard. Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I couldn't go through with it. When the minister asked if I took James to be my husband, I just couldn't say the words. I ran instead." Her voice broke slightly. "I ran out of the church, through the town, into the desert. That took incredible courage," Samuel said, his admiration clear. "Most people would have gone through with it rather than face the consequences." He could imagine the scene. Eleanor in her wedding dress, fleeing into the wilderness rather than submit to a loveless marriage. "My father was furious," Elena continued. "He sent men after me, but I knew the country better than they did. I managed to stay ahead of them until I reached Willow Creek." She touched the mask unconsciously. "That's when I realized I needed to hide my identity." "Why the mask, specifically?" Samuel asked. "You could have just changed your name, cut your hair." He was genuinely curious about her choice. Elena hesitated. There's a scar," she said finally, "on my face. It's distinctive, recognizable. The mask hides it." Her voice carried shame, as if she thought the scar made her less worthy somehow. Samuel felt a surge of protective anger. "How did you get it?" He suspected he already knew the answer, and it made him furious. "My father," Elena said simply. "When I was 17, I spoke back to him in front of his business associates. He reminded me of my place." She touched the mask again, and Samuel could see the pain in her eyes. "He hit you," Samuel said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Hard enough to leave a permanent scar." The idea of anyone hurting Elena made him want to find Colonel Worthington and give him a taste of his own medicine. It was a long time ago, Elena said quickly, as if trying to minimize what had happened. I learned to be more careful after that. The casual way she spoke about it made Samuel's heart ache. Elena, he said gently, no one has the right to hurt you like that. Not your father, not your intended husband, not anyone. He wanted to reach out and comfort her, but he sensed she needed space to process her emotions. I know that now, Elena replied, looking at him with something like gratitude. Meeting you, having someone treat me with respect. It's helped me remember that I'm worth more than what my father made me believe. They sat in comfortable silence after that, both lost in their own thoughts. Samuel found himself thinking about Elena's courage, her strength in the face of such adversity. She was remarkable, and he was beginning to realize his feelings for her were deepening into something more than simple partnership. The next few days passed peacefully as they traveled through increasingly wild country. Elena seemed to relax as they put more distance between themselves and civilization. She laughed more, shared stories about her childhood, and proved to be an excellent traveling companion. One evening, as they camped in a sheltered valley, Elena surprised Samuel by removing her hat and unpinning her hair. The dark locks fell around her shoulders, and even with the mask she was breathtakingly beautiful. The desert air feels good, she said, running her fingers through her hair. It's been a long time since I felt free. There was wonder in her voice, as if she was rediscovering something she'd lost. Samuel watched her with growing affection. You are free, he said softly. Whatever happens, you don't have to go back to that life. He meant every word, and he hoped she could hear the sincerity in his voice. Eleanor looked at him across the fire, and for a moment he thought she might remove the mask. Instead, she smiled. He could see it in her eyes, and said, Thank you, Samuel, for everything. As they prepared for sleep, Samuel found himself thinking about the future. His original plan had been to map the territories and return to civilization, but now he wasn't so sure. The idea of Elena having to hide forever, of never being able to show her face freely, bothered him deeply. Elena, he said quietly, what if there was another way? What if you didn't have to hide forever? He had an idea forming, but he wasn't sure if she'd be willing to consider it. Eleanor turned to look at him, hope and fear warring in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked softly. What if we could find a way to make you truly free? Not just hidden, but free to be yourself without fear. Samuel's mind was racing with possibilities. There are places beyond the mapped territories where your father's influence doesn't reach. You mean never go back to civilization? Elena asked, and Samuel was surprised to hear excitement rather than fear in her voice. We could build a life out here, Samuel said, his heart racing as he spoke. Together. The territory is vast, and there are hidden valleys where we could make a home. You'd never have to hide again. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment, and Samuel held his breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. As they settled down for the night, Samuel felt a sense of rightness he'd never experienced before. He was falling in love with Elena, and the possibility of building a life with her in the wilderness felt like the greatest adventure of all. The next morning brought new challenges as they entered the most dangerous part of their journey. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, with towering cliffs and deep canyons that could hide any number of threats. Samuel kept his rifle ready as they picked their way through the rocky terrain. Elena rode beside him, her eyes constantly scanning the high ground for signs of danger. This is Apache territory, she said quietly. They don't take kindly to strangers, especially ones traveling through their sacred lands. Samuel nodded grimly. I know, but it's also the only way to reach the hidden valley. If we can find it, we'll have a place where your father's men will never think to look. He guided his horse carefully around a fallen boulder, the sound of hooves echoing off the canyon walls. As they traveled deeper into the wilderness, the silence became oppressive. Even the wind seemed muted, as if the very air was holding its breath. Elena moved closer to Samuel, her horse's shoulder brushing against his. "Do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Running away from everything we've known?" There was uncertainty in her voice, but also a kind of desperate hope. "Freedom is never a mistake," Samuel replied firmly. "We're not running away, Eleanor. We're running toward something better." He reached out and squeezed her hand briefly, offering what comfort he could. The gesture was simple, but it sent warmth through Elena's entire being. "I've never had anyone fight for me before," she said softly. "It's overwhelming." Her voice carried a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something that made Samuel's heart race. As the day wore on, they encountered signs of human presence. Old campfires, horse tracks, and carved symbols on the rocks. Samuel studied them carefully, his experience helping him read the story they told. "We're being watched," he said quietly, his hand moving to his gun. "There are at least 3 riders following us, staying just out of sight." He kept his voice calm, not wanting to alarm Elena unnecessarily. Elena's posture straightened, but she didn't panic. "How long have they been following us?" she asked, her own hand moving to the revolver at her hip. Samuel had been impressed by her marksmanship during their practice sessions. "Since yesterday morning, I think," Samuel replied. "They're good, staying downwind, keeping to the high ground, but they're getting closer." He scanned the canyon walls above them, looking for the glint of metal or the shadow of movement. "Do you think they're my father's men?" Elena asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Or Apache warriors?" Either possibility was dangerous, but for different reasons. Samuel considered the question carefully. "Hard to say. The tracking is too good for most hired guns, but the patient suggests they're not Apache. Warriors would have attacked by now if they meant us harm." He guided his horse into a narrow side canyon, seeking cover. Elena followed, her mount's hooves clicking on the rocky ground. "Then who?" she asked, but even as she spoke she seemed to reach her own conclusion. Unless they're waiting for something." Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. "Waiting for what?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "For us to lead them to the hidden valley," Eleanor said, her voice heavy with realization. "If my father's men know we're looking for it, they might be content to follow us there rather than risk losing us in a confrontation." The implications were sobering. "Then we need to lose them," Samuel said grimly, "or find a way to deal with them before they can report back." He studied the terrain around them, looking for options. Elena was quiet for a moment, then made a decision. "There's another way," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We could confront them directly. If they're my father's men, they might be willing to negotiate." Samuel shook his head immediately. "Too dangerous. Your father's men won't negotiate. They'll take you back by force." The idea of Elena falling into her father's hands again made his blood run cold. "Then what do you suggest?" Eleanor asked, though she seemed to already know his answer. "We fight," Samuel said simply. "If they mean to take you back, they'll have to go through me first." His voice carried absolute conviction, and Elena felt a surge of emotion at his dedication. "I can't ask you to risk your life for me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You've already done so much, given up so much." The weight of what he was sacrificing for her was beginning to sink in. Samuel turned to look at her fully, his eyes intense. "You're not asking, Elena. I'm choosing, and I'd make the same choice again, every time." The words came from his heart, carrying all the love he felt for her. Elena stared at him, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. "Samuel," she whispered, and there was everything in that single word, gratitude, fear, love, and hope all tangled together. Before either of them could say more, the sound of hoofbeats echoed through the canyon. Their pursuers had found them, and the time for running was over. "Stay close," Samuel said, drawing his rifle, "and remember what I taught you about shooting from horseback." He positioned himself between Elena and the approaching riders, his body tense with readiness. 3 men emerged from the canyon shadows. their faces hard and determined. Samuel recognized the type. Professional gunmen, the kind who asked no questions and felt no remorse. They were dressed in traveling clothes, but their weapons were well maintained and their eyes were cold. "That's far enough," the lead rider called out, his hand resting on his gun. "We just want the woman. No need for anyone to get hurt." His voice carried the flat tone of someone accustomed to violence. "The woman is under my protection," Samuel replied, his rifle trained on the speaker. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go." His voice was steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. The lead gunman smiled coldly. "Colonel Worthington is offering $1,000 for his daughter's safe return. That's more than most men see in a year." He gestured to his companions, who spread out slightly. "Elena," Samuel said quietly, not taking his eyes off the men, "when I give the signal, ride hard for that outcropping of rocks. Don't look back, no matter what happens." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not leaving you," she said fiercely. "We're partners, remember? We face this together." Her hand tightened on her gun, and Samuel felt a surge of pride at her courage. The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, each side waiting for the other to make the first move. The desert wind whistled through the canyon, carrying the scent of dust and danger. "Last chance!" the gunman called out. "Hand over the woman and we'll let you ride away. Try to stop us and we'll take her anyway, over your dead body." His companions nodded agreement, their faces grim. Samuel felt time slow as his finger tightened on the trigger. "Elena," he said softly, "whatever happens, know that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice carried all the love he felt for her. "Samuel, don't—" Elena began, but her words were cut off as the first shot rang out. The gunfight was brief but intense. Samuel's first shot took down the leader, but the other two men were already moving, their guns blazing. Elena's horse reared as bullets whined past, but she kept her seat and returned fire. Samuel felt a bullet tug at his sleeve as he worked the lever of his rifle. The sound was deafening in the confined space, echoing off the canyon walls. Dust and gunpowder filled the air, making it hard to see. One of the remaining gunmen cried out and clutched his shoulder as Elena's shot found its mark. Samuel's second shot finished him, leaving only one enemy standing. The last gunman, realizing he was outmatched, tried to retreat, but Samuel's final shot caught him before he could reach cover, and he fell from his horse with a strangled cry. Silence fell over the canyon like a shroud. Samuel's ears were ringing from the gunshots, and he could taste dust and fear in his mouth. "Elena?" he called out, his voice hoarse. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice was shaking. "Are you?" She dismounted quickly and ran to his side, her eyes scanning him for injuries. Samuel holstered his rifle and reached for her, pulling her into his arms. "I'm okay," he said, holding her tightly. "It's over. They can't hurt you now." He could feel her trembling against him, the adrenaline of the fight wearing off. Elena clung to him, overwhelmed by what had just happened. "You could have been killed," she whispered against his chest. "Because of me, you could have died." The guilt in her voice was unmistakable. "But I didn't," Samuel said firmly, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. "And neither did you. We're alive, Elena. We're free." He searched her face, seeing the mix of fear and relief there. Elena looked up at him, and something in her expression changed. "Samuel," she said softly, "I need to tell you something about why I really wear the mask." Her voice carried a note of decision, as if she'd made up her mind about something important. Samuel waited patiently, sensing this was a crucial moment. "You can tell me anything," he said gently. "Nothing will change how I feel about you." Elena took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "The scar my father gave me. It's not just any scar, it's—" She paused, struggling with the words. "It's a brand. He branded me like cattle to mark me as his property." Samuel felt rage surge through him like fire. "He branded you?" The words came out as a growl, barely human in their fury. That monster branded his own daughter. He wanted to find Colonel Worthington and make him pay for what he'd done. He said it was to remind me that I belonged to him, Eleanor continued, her voice barely above a whisper, that I would never be free of him, no matter where I went. She touched the mask unconsciously, a gesture that now carried even more weight. Samuel felt sick at the thought of what she'd endured. "Elena," he said gently, "you don't belong to anyone. You're your own person, with your own choices and your own life." He wanted to take away her pain, to somehow undo what had been done to her. "I know that now," Elena said, looking up at him with eyes full of trust. "Being with you, seeing how you treat me, it's helped me remember my own worth." She reached up and touched the edge of her mask. "I want to show you. I want you to see all of me." Samuel's heart pounded as he realized what she was saying. "Only if you want to," he said softly. "I don't need to see your face to know you're beautiful." He meant every word, but he also understood the significance of what she was offering. Elena smiled, and even through the mask, her joy was radiant. "I want to," she said. "For the first time in years, I want someone to see me." Her hands moved to the ties of her mask, and Samuel held his breath. Slowly, carefully, Elena removed the black silk mask. The scar was there, just as she'd said, a cruel brand on her left cheek that spoke of unimaginable cruelty. But Samuel barely noticed it because he was looking at her eyes, her smile, the way the afternoon light played across her features. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice full of awe. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." He reached up to touch her face gently, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. Elena's eyes filled with tears at his words. "Even with the scar?" she asked, her voice vulnerable in a way that made his heart ache. "The scar is part of you," Samuel said firmly. "And every part of you is beautiful to me." He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, his lips brushing the edge of the brand. "It doesn't define you, Elena. Your courage, your kindness, your strength, that's what makes you beautiful." Elena felt something break open inside her chest, a wall she'd built around her heart crumbling at his words. "I love you," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "I think I've been falling in love with you since the moment we met." Samuel's heart soared at her confession. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought possible." He cupped her face in his hands, mindful of her scar, and kissed her gently. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. Elena melted into his embrace, feeling truly free for the first time in her life. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "What happens now?" Elena asked, her voice full of wonder. "Where do we go from here?" Samuel smiled, his eyes bright with love and determination. "We find that hidden valley," he said. "We build a life together, away from your father's reach. We start over, just the two of us." Elena nodded, hope shining in her eyes. "And I never have to hide again?" she asked, as if she couldn't quite believe it was possible. "Never again," Samuel promised. "You're free, Elena. We're both free." He helped her back onto her horse, then mounted his own, ready for the adventure of a lifetime. Elena laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the desert air. "I'm ready," she said. "As long as you're with me, I'm ready for anything." As they rode deeper into the wilderness, leaving the bodies of their attackers behind, Samuel felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. He'd found love in the most unexpected place, and together they would build a new life in the untamed territories. The sun was setting as they made camp in a sheltered valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Elena sat beside the fire without her mask, her face radiant in the firelight. Samuel found himself constantly stealing glances at her, still amazed by her beauty. "Tell me about the hidden valley," Elena said, settling against his shoulder. "What do you think we'll find there?" Samuel wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. According to the old maps, it's a place of springs and green meadows, protected by high cliffs. The Spanish called it Valle Escondido, the hidden valley. It sounds like paradise, Elena said dreamily. A place where we can be ourselves without fear. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with hope. Do you really think we can make it work? Build a life together out here? I know we can, Samuel said with absolute certainty. We've already proven we make a good team, and now that we don't have to hide anymore, we can focus on building something beautiful together. Elena smiled, her face glowing with happiness. I never thought I'd have a choice in my own future, she said, but here I am, free to choose my own path, my own love, my own life. She kissed him softly. Thank you for showing me what freedom really means. Samuel held her close, feeling the warmth of her body against his. Thank you for being brave enough to take it, he replied. For running away from that church, for trusting me, for showing me your face. He stroked her hair gently. You're the strongest person I know. As the stars came out overhead, they talked about their plans for the future. They would find the hidden valley, build a cabin by the springs, maybe raise horses or cattle. Elena wanted to start a garden, to grow things in the fertile soil. Samuel wanted to continue his mapping work, documenting the uncharted territories. We'll have children someday, Elena said softly, her hand resting on his chest. Little ones who'll never know what it's like to be trapped or afraid. Her voice carried a wistful quality that made Samuel's heart ache with love. They'll be as brave and beautiful as their mother, Samuel said, kissing the top of her head. And they'll grow up free in a place where they can be anything they want to be. Elena looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I love you so much, she whispered. I can't believe this is real, that I get to have this happiness. It's real, Samuel assured her. And it's just the beginning. He pulled her closer, marveling at the way she fit perfectly against him. We have the rest of our lives to build this dream together. As they settled down for the night, Elena curled up against Samuel's side, her face peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. The mask lay forgotten beside their bedroll, no longer needed. Samuel lay awake for a while, listening to her gentle breathing and thinking about the journey that had brought them together. He'd set out to map unknown territories, but he'd found something far more valuable. A love that would last a lifetime. The next morning dawned clear and bright, with the promise of adventure ahead. Elena woke without immediately reaching for her mask, and Samuel felt a surge of joy at seeing her face in the morning light. Good morning, beautiful, he said, kissing her softly. Ready to find our valley? Elena smiled, her face radiant with happiness. I'm ready, she said. Let's go find our new home. And as they mounted their horses and rode toward the unknown, Samuel felt certain they were heading toward the greatest adventure of their lives. They had found love in the wilderness, and together they would build a life as vast and beautiful as the frontier itself. The hidden valley was waiting for them just beyond the next ridge, and with it a future full of hope and possibility. Elena rode beside him, her face uncovered and her heart open, finally free to be herself in the wide, wild world. So tell me, listeners, do you think Samuel and Elena will find their hidden valley? And what challenges do you think they'll face as they try to build their new life together in the untamed wilderness?